This presentation will cover the purpose of Soybean Form B and the items on the Form B. The Soybean Form B is used to collect various components used to forecast soybean yield. The data collected in the Soybean Objective Yield Survey is used to forecast soybean production in the major soybean producing states. Data from the Form A, Form B, and the Form E, gleaning, is combined to help forecast the current year's acreage, production, and harvest loss. Data from the Soybean Form B will be submitted on CAPI, but the form itself should be filled out in the field and then entered into CAPI later. Ideally, data will be submitted on the same day as the field work. However, there is an exception. If a final visit must be completed between work periods, please complete the Form B using the date the work was completed. This is the same date that will be entered on the ID cards that are sent to the lab in St. Louis along with the sample. In this case, please hold the Form B until CAPI is open for the next month. Then enter the Form B data into CAPI and submit ASAP. It is very important to retain the previous month's Form B for reference in subsequent months. Having the previous month's Form B, which contains last month's counts and comments, will help in completing the current month's Form B. The field work date is very important. The 2-digit month plus the 2-digit day is part of the ID field for each sample. So, each sample has a unique ID each month. The point and the sample number don't change, obviously, but the field work date does change each month. This is how we differentiate between the Form Bs for a given sample. The correct field work date must be entered in CAPI before any other data can be entered. Be aware of organophosphorus pesticide applications to the sample field. Safety is your #1 priority. Please do not enter a field that has recently been sprayed. If a Form B can't be completed for a given month, whatever the reason, please submit the Form B for that month as inaccessible, status code 8. The first Form B filled out for a given sample will have the unit location code equal 1 for each unit. Assuming the unit is found during the next visit, which should be most, if not all of the time, the unit location code will be 3 for that visit. Unit location 2 should only be used when the unit had to be laid out again because the original unit could not be found. This should be rare, assuming the unit was originally laid out and marked correctly and a sketch was written on the kit envelope. The row space measurements are used to help determine the plant count per acre. The 50-foot tape, which shows feet and tenths of feet, is to be used to take row space measurements. The 2 row space measurements, row 1 to row 2 and row 1 to row 5, should be taken at the beginning of the buffer zone going perpendicular to the rows. Please be very careful as you make the row space measurements. It is critical to measure perpendicular to the rows to get an accurate measurement. Going across rows at an angle will be inaccurate. This is an illustration of making row space determinations. Keep in mind that the row 1 to row 5 measurement goes across 4 row middles. Let's assume that the field was planted in 15-inch rows. You will already know this because the planter row width setting is asked on the Form A. 15-inch row spacing is very common, and many farmers have split row planters, which allows them to use the same planter to plant 30-inch corn and 15-inch soybeans. Let's also assume that the field is very uniform where the unit is and that each row is 15 inches apart from its neighboring row. Please see that the row space measurements, item 3 on the Form B, must be entered in feet and tenths. So, since 15 divided by 12 equals 1.25, the number for item 3A is 1.3. 1.25 rounds to 1.3. And the number for item 3B is 5.0. 60 divided by 12 equals 5.0. The 60 comes from 4 15-inch spaces. Let's look at another example of drilled soybeans with 7-inch spacing, and let's assume the rows are evenly spaced. In this case, item 3A equals 0.6, 7 divided by 12 equals 0.58, and item 3B equals 2.3. 28 divided by 12 equals 2.33. The 28 comes from 4 7-inch spaces. Please be aware of gaps in the rows. It can be easy to miss a row or to mistake a volunteer plant for a row. If there truly are wide or narrow gaps, please submit a comment to validate your measurements. Each unit is different and may represent a unique situation. So please review the interviewer's manual to become familiar with some of the common things that you may encounter. Keep in mind that for twin rows, each set of twin rows should be considered one row. Laying out soybean units is similar to corn units in that the row space measurements are taken at the beginning of the buffer zone, and the buffer zone for each unit is 5 feet long. For soybeans and corn, the count area portion of the unit begins at the end of the buffer zone. The difference between laying out the count area portion for corn and soybeans is the use of the soybean frame. Please reference the illustration to see the proper use of the soybean frame. The count area of a soybean unit consists of two parts, the 6-inch count area and the 3-foot count area. A florist stake should be put at the beginning of the buffer zone. This stake should have the sample number and the unit number written on it. In this illustration, this unit is sample 136, unit 1. The florist stake at the beginning of the 6-inch count area should also contain the sample number, the unit number, plus the row number. Please see where the other two stakes should be. The first and last plants in the 6-inch count area should be marked with a plant tag, and the first and last plants in the 3-foot count area should be marked with flagging ribbon. This is important because sometimes stakes disappear. Tagging the plants properly will help you in subsequent visits if some of the stakes are gone. The only count made in the 3-foot count area is plants. The number of plants in the 3-foot count area is documented each month, regardless of maturity. Please document any unusual situations on the Form B. For example, a small plant may not be present the next month, so good documentation from the previous month will help justify changes in the plant count. Submit a comment if the plant count changes for any row. Based on the unit's maturity, please circle the items on the back page that need to be completed. Notice items 6 and 10 are the only items on the back page that are to be completed if the unit is in Maturity Code 3. This is also true for a unit in Maturity Code 4. The difference is how the summary system handles the data. If you are undecided as to what maturity code to use, please use the lower stage of maturity. If no plants are present, please submit a comment. Something simple such as verified no plants is good enough. Nodes are counted on all plants in the 6-inch count area. Item 7 on the Form B is the sum of all nodes on all plants in the 6-inch count area. It is critical that nodes on the main stem only are counted. Do not count nodes on the lateral branches. Each plant must have at least one node since the growing tip is counted as a node. If the main stem forks and forms two main stems, please submit a note explaining the potentially high node count. Lateral branches originate from the main stem and are usually found near the base of the plant. Lateral branches are rarely found near the top of the plant. It is not uncommon for plants to have no lateral branches. In fact, unless a lateral branch actually ends up producing pods, it can actually reduce a plant's production by robbing the main stem and other producing lateral branches of valuable nutrients. A lateral branch must contain at least one node and at least one flower of some kind, bloom or pod. A fruiting stalk also originates from the main stem, but has no flowers or nodes. Nothing on a fruiting stalk is counted except, of course, the node on the main stem where the fruiting stalk originates. Here is a helpful hint in counting the number of blooms, dried flowers, and pods. Let's assume there are 3 plants in the 6-inch count area. It might be easier to count the blooms, dried flowers, and pods on the first plant and write the number somewhere on the Form B. Then, take a quick break to take a drink or wipe the sweat out of your eyes, etc., before making the counts for the second plant. When you are finished with the blooms, dried flowers, and pods count for the second plant, write it down and take another quick break. Repeat the process for the third plant. Add the 3 numbers together and enter it in item 9. The same can be done for item 10. Please take a close look at items 9 and 10. See how it makes sense that the count in item 10 absolutely must be less than or equal to the count for item 9? If the number you enter in line 10 is greater than the number you enter in line 9, you will be asked about it. After completing items 6 through 10, please review your entries for accuracy. This is how items 6 through 10 look in CAPI. For units that are in Maturity Code 5, all pods from all plants in row 1 of the 3-foot section are harvested. Do not harvest pods from plants in the 6-inch count area. Reference the interviewer's manual and the instructions on the Form B to accurately conduct the harvest of the units. Put the harvested pods in separate bags, 1 bag for the pods in row 1 of Unit 1 and 1 bag for the pods in row 1 of Unit 2. Make sure to complete and send 2 ID cards, even if 1 unit is not mature yet or has no pods. Include the completed ID cards with the harvested sample, making sure the date on the ID cards match the fieldwork date on the Form B. These are the most common status codes that you will use. For each unit with status code 1, a Form B is expected the next month for that unit. For a sample where both units are status code 4, a Form B is not expected the next month. For refusals, the status code for each unit will be 7. No Form B is expected next month. For units with status code 8, a Form B is expected next month. It is impossible to cover all the possible things you might encounter as you do your fieldwork. So, please become familiar with the Form B and the interviewer's manual. Also, don't hesitate to reach out to your supervisor, NASDA coordinator, or OY survey staff. Also, please document any unusual circumstances. All comments submitted on CAPI are appreciated.